Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. Pub Chat Edition. We are drinking today, but we're always drinking in spirit.
Sometimes I'm just beveraging, or what we created a whole rule about this.
Yeah,
Because
well, it's not. You're not drinking if there's not alcohol in it. Then it's just beveraging.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I'm drinking. Sometimes I'm beveraging. Today it's drinking.
Today's actually drinking.
Glug glug.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not really.
It's, it's champagne. Let's not be dramatic, right?
Yeah.
You didn't even have any brandy. That's like my second. We drank a brandy.
Yeah, I have.
So.
This is the first drink that I've had in a week because I've been sick. So if my voice sounds off, that is why I am recovering from a cold.
Yeah, she's definitely not an artificially created replacement because the royal family doesn't want to admit to nothing.
Where is she?
You know what?
I need to know.
We're not talking about that today. I recommend go to the internet. Why does it lie?
We can only do one conspiracy theory an episode.
And that was a conspiracy
we just
theory?
learned this.
Yeah,
so that's it. We're done.
Yeah,
if
we're
you
done.
were here for a later conspiracy theory,
it's not happening.
That's it.
I cannot guarantee I'm not going to run into a conspiracy theory because this is a pub chat. Pub chats are the off-week episodes where I'm in charge. So we don't have a script. And honestly, most of the time I don't know what we're talking about.
Actually, we never have a script. We don't have episodes. We just have bullet points.
Yeah, we don't even have that. We don't even have that. So this week's episode of I'm John Norgrove and this is Julie Norgrove, by the by. This week's episode of the Horn and Cauldron podcast Pub Chat Edition is doing magic in ancient languages.
Huh?
And specifically, let me tell you why we're talking about this. So for St. Patrick's Day, we decided to go on a pretty bonkers tour of movies. So we were like, okay, it's St. Patty's Day. What do we want to watch?
And we were trying to think of what to watch.
We were like, what should we watch? What should we watch? And we talked about doing
Boondock Saints.
Boondock Saints.
Everybody does
Boondock Saints.
And I know there's a bunch of other Irish movies we could have watched. Basically, our other choice was horror movies.
Yeah. And so we're like, I don't know, what do we want to watch? And then I don't really know why Eddie Murphy came up, but he did. And so we decided to watch Coming to America 2.
Because Murphy's an
Irish last name, and
that doesn't mean that Eddie Murphy is Irish.
Although he might be Irish, I actually have no clue. I don't know the guy.
The surname Murphy
is Irish.
Has Irish.
So
origins.
You know what? Tenuous enough connection. So we watched
Coming to America too.
Again, we've seen it before. I think we might have a review of it on the channel, so look for that.
Maybe.
And if not, we'll do one. So then when we got done with that, we were like, all right, what's next? And then we were stuck with, okay, now we have to do another movie that's definitely not specifically Irish, but that has a last name that's Irish. Because we like to make rules when we're trying to select movies. You know,
it makes it way more
like
fun.
A monster.
Yeah.
And we came into the idea.
We were scrolling and I saw The Mummy and I was like, O'Connell is an Irish last name.
That's Irish.
By the way, we looked all these names up on Google. So
yeah. If they're wrong, let us know.
Yeah.
So we decided to watch The Mummy. And while we were watching The Mummy...
Also, for the record, the third movie was RoboCop because the main guy's last name is also Murphy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the cop's name is Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not talking about RoboCop today.
No, we're not. Although we could. But we're not. So, and we're not really even actually talking about The Mummy, but that's sort of what got us on this conversation because we were watching The Mummy and we were at the part at the end of The Mummy. I guess spoiler alerts for a 48-year-old movie, dog. So, a movie from before the turn of the century.
Yeah. And it's the scene where Rachel Weisz is fighting the mummy, and her brother is trying to read
from the Book of the Dead
so that he can control the mummy minions.
The guards with the swords.
I don't know what this word means, and she's dodging blows.
Yeah. And she's like, what is the picture? And he's like,
it's a bird.
Thing. Yeah.
It's a stork. And he does this arm thing, and she's like, a manifest.
Yeah.
So that got us.
So that got us thinking. And so okay, so in the Mummy, they're reading from the Book of the Dead, and the Book of the Dead is what allows them to like summon the mummy and unsummon the mummy and do a bunch of other mummy-based shenanigery, right? And it made me I paused the movie. I'm one of those people. I paused the movie to pose the question. It's to not interrupt the movie. You're welcome.
Otherwise, you can just keep talking.
That's true. I'll just talk over. I can do two things at once, or don't care.
This is why sometimes it takes us 4 hours to watch an hour and a half movie.
That's very true. I have opinions. They need to be heard. But it's fair. So I was like, all right, is the Book of the Dead written in just like old Egyptian or whatever, right? Old, what's the name? Coptic?
Well, that is one of them, but the Book of the Dead is written in ancient Egyptian. I think it's written in hieratic, but I'm not 100% sure. It's also been written. It was also written over the course of like several hundred years.
And also we're talking about the Book of the Dead in the Mummy movie, not like the actual Book of the Dead.
Yeah,
so like. Whatever.
But it was written in the language that they were speaking at the time that it was written.
So Julie says it was written in the language that they were speaking when it was written. And that made me start to like kind of wonder, like, okay, well, I mean, I guess this is obvious, but okay, so like if you're doing like magical witchy stuff, like if you're part of like Order of the New Dawn or whatever the hell it's called, like back in like the 1800s and 1700s or whenever, right? It's like you were doing like magic in Latin,
probably,
or whatever, right? And so for me, the thing is like, okay, so like I get that this is like as an English speaker, this is like, oh, look at this magical language. This guy's reading hieratic or Coptic or speaking Latin or whatever. But like if you speak Latin, that's just like your day-to-day language. And so it made me kind of pose this question, like, is it sort of absurd that we do that? Like we look at this, this is the most magical way to do magic, is to use what we perceive of as an ancient or dead language, but what is in fact just the language spoken by the dudes that are doing it then.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's and I see this argument a lot in runes, right? So like a lot of people are like, runes weren't used for magic, runes was just the written language of the time, right? Like in like Elder Futhark.
People that are really into like the historical aspect of it are like, runes were magical guys.
Right. But at the same time, if you lived in a time where your written language was Elder Futhark, right, which is the name of the runic language, right? If you lived in a time where like your written language was Elder Futhark, then would you not be doing magic in Elder Futhark?
You absolutely would be.
Right?
Which leads me down this like really interesting like mental rabbit hole. So like I like to think of things like what people would think about the time that we currently live in, like thousands of years in the future. You know, like we do with like
hell, honestly, 25 years in the future,
archaeological digs. Right now. Like basically the idea behind us using Elder Futhark in like
or
magic,
Coptic or Latin.
Well, no, specifically Elder Futhark in runes. Mm-hmm. And you've got like a rune set and you like toss the runes, would be like if you made like an alphabet like rune set, and then you assigned each letter like a specific magical intent, and then you're just like throwing an alphabet around.
But we do that.
Yes.
Right? Because like look at like tarot is just essentially playing cards modified into a magical conversation.
Yes.
Right? And
I just like to think of the idea as like somebody doing the alphabet, and it's like, you know, that thing that like alphabet cereal or alphabet soup does, where like whoop, turns into a word, and you're like, oh no.
But we do use like the Roman alphabet, whatever the hell you call a written English alphabet.
Yes.
Right? We do use that for magical writing.
Yes.
Right? And we do use that for like, my alphabet soup said Dionysus, so I'm having wine for lunch or fucking whatever. Right? I didn't need an excuse. But like, so we kind of already have that like magical practice involved. And I mean, at the same time, I wonder like, okay, so like if you were living in like, let's say, like if you were living in like Cairo right now, or you were living in like Beijing or Tokyo or you know, Moscow, who uses a different like written letters language, right? Like, could English letters be a magical? Could English, like, if you live in, like, let's say, if you lived in, like, some place in, like, South Sudan and nobody speaks English around you, could English be a magical language to you? Because it's like, are we only saying that these languages are magical because they have a connection to, like, ancient stuff? Are we saying that they're magical because, like, we just don't understand them?
Well, so
right?
I think
or are we saying it's because, like, okay, sure, if you're practicing, like, ancient Greek magic, then, like, Latin kind of makes sense, right?
Well, yes, but also it doesn't, but it also doesn't need to. So, like, this idea...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying
this idea that you, like, have to, like, use, like, an ancient language to do magic is... Obviously, if you're a listener, like, this is no big surprise. Is like, no, you don't need to do that, right?
Keep dog. Let me tell you, I'm not learning an ancient
like,
language.
When I was like a baby witch in the 90s, and like I remember people going like, "Oh, you have to do this spell in Latin. It's the most magical of magics, and your spells will be that much more potent." But like, if you didn't understand Latin, how do you not know you're just not like repeating the word soup over and over again?
Yeah.
But also like from a sociological perspective.
Isn't it just the hiragana or katakana tattoo? You know,
yeah,
the like white girl tattoo. You're like, it says harmony, but like it actually just says like soup or whatever.
Because I actually like took Latin classes.
Yeah.
And Latin it's not that difficult of a language to understand, especially if you know like modern day Spanish or French. But like it's not an easy one to understand. And I don't know now because it's been many years since I practiced Latin. So maybe things are different with like the advent of like Duolingo and Babbel and stuff like that. But when I was learning it, you just had a textbook, you had a class you went to, you know, that sort of thing. But like it wasn't what I learned from my teacher then
1 ton. It was made out of fucking concrete slabs or whatever.
It was just like stamped slabs.
Yeah.
Is it wasn't really like a spoken language, right? So you couldn't like you like the other students in my class and we didn't converse in Latin.
But you like wrote shit.
But we like wrote stuff and we like translated stuff from English to Latin and from Latin to English.
Sure.
But we didn't like hold conversations in Latin. Like we would say sentences, but it wasn't really this. It may have been just the way I was taught, but it also may be the way that they thought about it then, is like Latin wasn't really a spoken language.
Well, like we don't know how those sounds are supposed to sound. Although I feel like I follow a dude on TikTok who like,
but that was like
knows how to do
years ago, right?
That's fair,
so
that's fair.
I don't know how much that is, but I do know that
the advent of mammals coming out of the ocean.
Yeah, right. But like I do know that I did decide to take Latin because I thought it would be really cool to like learn a language that like nobody else knew.
Yeah.
Like I didn't actually even then use it for magic stuff, even though that was definitely the hype. Because
like
I
subtext.
felt like
unconscious subtext.
Yeah, well, I felt like I didn't have a good enough grasp of it, and why would I be saying these words that I don't understand? Don't read from the book, especially if you don't know what it's saying.
Oh boy, let me tell you, y'all gotta stop reading from books with you don't know what they are, right? What is this? Surprise book? Don't read from it. What is this? A puzzle box? Did you just find it in a basement? Don't solve the puzzle box. Nothing good's gonna come out of that puzzle. You're not gonna open it up. There's gonna be a bloody Superman #1. Impossible, dog. It's high risk at best.
The puzzle box is like 4x4.
Yeah, it's not even gonna work. It's extra dimensional puzzle box.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, you know, it makes me think. So I've never really been one to be like, oh, I'm gonna learn Latin to do magic or whatever the heck, right? Like that's not really my vibe. I like know runes and stuff, but I also haven't committed to memory what the runes mean.
Yeah, you do often look up.
Yeah, I almost always look it up.
Yeah.
But that's because...
But there was a time when you knew what runes represented what letters.
Oh, I can write English words in runes still. To this day, I can do that. There's like a few runes that I kind of have to double check just in case. But for the most part, I know the like... You know, this is how you make a H. This is how you make a B. This is how you make a R.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I know their names. This is, Raido, or this is bloody,
and I've done the same thing with
Thala or
with
whatever.
Tolkien's Sindarin language, one of the Elven languages.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful and I like the way that it looks.
Yeah.
But it's wildly impractical to be using for like everyday notes. Also, I don't really write a lot of stuff by hand. And so
my handwriting is an actual nightmare. And in fact, the only reason why I know how to do runes, like I know like what the runes translate over to like back as English letters as well as I do, is because when I used to work like on the floor of the brewery, we had to take notes for like time and temperature and what beer it was and like all that kind of stuff. And in my notebook, I took my notes in runes because I was like, I want to learn like which runes are which and how to write them and be kind of like be able to read them quickly and easily. Therefore, I am going to just start taking all my notes in runes. And I remember, dude, I used to take my notes and I would I still actually have the exact same picture on my phone. It's a picture that's got like, this is what it is in English. This is what it is in runes. Right. And,
I also have that picture on my phone because it makes it easier to talk with you about that stuff.
Yeah, no, totally.
Because
totally.
then we know that we're going off of the same thing.
Yeah, totally. And so I would oh, I got to take notes for this tank. And I would take my phone out and look at it and then quickly write all this stuff out.
Yeah.
So, and now it's I don't even have to think about it very much. But at the same time, for me, that's more of a novelty. I mean, I use runes. I have a set of runes. I have several rune decks. I carve my own runes, all that sort of stuff. But it's interesting to think about. And I've thought about this before for sure, but I guess I haven't really given it the full breadth of thinking about the Book of the Dead seems mystical and magical to us, right? Because we don't know what stork means. But
we do. I mean, we
do, right?
Yeah. Well, actually,
that brother didn't.
You know what? We don't know what the word amenaphis means specifically. Now that I think about it, we know that the stork means amenaphis. I don't know if it does in real life, but in the movie, it does.
Yeah,
it's amenaphis, but we don't know what that word means
necessarily.
Yeah,
totally. But you got to think about it. Okay, so if you're reading from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a la the Mummy movie, the dude who wrote that, Amenhotep or whatever, when that was written, that was just a recipe, dog. That said 2 cups of that lady's salt.
Yeah, he was just,
you know what I'm saying? Tablespoon of salt.
Yeah, he was
that
just
shit was just written.
Diary.
Yeah, right? And you see people and they come up with their own written languages or their own spoken languages.
It's really cool.
It's very cool. I don't have time for that shit.
It's totally cool. It's not practical for me.
Yeah,
I really love the idea of writing something in a language like that. And then I remember 1, how much work that is. And 2, then I have to go back and remember what that is. And then I think about that medieval book that we don't have translations.
Oh, that one with all them weird plant pictures
all,
and stuff? Yeah, I think that one was just for jokes, but yeah.
Stuff. I think that was probably...
It's conspiracy theory, that's too.
Oh, no, we're at 2
it's not really a conspiracy theory because, the book is real.
The book is real.
The book is real, but, it's got, plants in it, pictures of plants, but they're not plants that have ever existed on this planet. And it's got, pictures of animals in it, but they're, not animals that have ever existed. And, honestly, I think it's just some old-timey dude's Dungeons and Dragons manual.
That's what I've always
right. It's just him and his boys used to play make-believe and Plants and Monsters.
Boom, look
whatever.
at us solving conspiracy theories.
But also, I don't know, what maybe he's from another world or something.
Maybe we'll turn into a prime-time TV show about it.
Yeah. But no, so and it's funny because thinking about this, watching The Mummy, is sort of on the back of we've been talking about we should probably stop being lazy and
we saw that Duolingo commercial at the Super Bowl and we were just oh,
it kind of took our minds, bro.
Yeah.
And so we're we should totally do that Olingo. And
so we've been off and on for several months now talking about if we were to do Duolingo, what Duolingo would we do?
Yeah. Right. And we're my default answer is always Japanese, because I watch a buttload of anime. but
also we watch a ton of Korean
But we watch
stuff.
like a lot of Korean
And
movies
also,
and TV
like,
shows.
separately, we both took French in high school, so that should be an easy way
Yeah,
to
maybe
get
we
back
just
up
do French again. But, like,
conversation.
what am I gonna do?
But then it's
with
like,
French?
okay,
I mean,
but
we
like...
have watched a lot of French movies.
We have, yes.
But also, we've watched a lot of Spanish movies, like from Spain, and Brazilian movies, and movies produced in Mexico, like Mexican movies. So, like, you know, it's like, okay, so what makes the most amount of sense? And also, Duolingo offers, we're not associated with them, by the way. That's just the example because they had the commercial on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're not associated with, TM. But they also have Klingon.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to learn a language and do magic in a language, Klingon is a pretty gangster language to do magic in.
Yeah, they also have High Valyrian from the Game of Thrones universe.
That's true.
But there was a time when I cared about that. That time is no longer. They broke my heart.
Yeah.
With the ending of the show.
Season 8, never forget.
Season
8, never forget.
Season 7 and 8, never forget. Can't go back.
That's true.
But
and
like,
House of Dragons.
When we saw Dune, I was like, okay, what is this language? Because now I need to learn it. And then I learned that they had like the same language scholar that developed Dothraki and High Valyrian for the Game of Thrones universe developed the language that they use for the Fremen in Dune.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my God, it's another language that I need to learn that's not spoken by like
most people
like regionally on this planet, but also like I need it. I need to know languages that no one else knows, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't necessarily
also,
care
Latin
about
on Duolingo.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily care about learning a language that other people do or do not know, but it's like, it would be cool to learn another language. Why not learn another language? But of course, if we're going to learn another language, if I'm learning Klingon and she's learning fucking Dothraki, that's useless. We're not going to be able to work together on it.
We should learn the same language. So we should
learn them. It doesn't mean that we're going to. But like, we should learn the same language. If we're going to do that, would we want to be doing that language? Like, there's a lot to kind of weigh in on that. Like, do we want to do a language that we're doing like magically stuff in or whatever? Also, how absurd is it to do magical stuff in another language? Because like, let's be perfectly real here, right? Like, doing magic stuff in Latin or whatever, like that's cool. Like, and it probably seems cool. And I'm like not hating. Like, if you learn Latin to do your magical work, fucking,
or if you use Google Translate,
congratulations,
to do for it, like go ahead.
That is genuinely impressive, and that's fire, right? But like,
that's more commitment than I will.
I don't have time for that shit. No hate, I just don't have time for that shit. So like, I'm just like, well, like, what should we be doing or whatever? And then we watch this thing, you know, we watch The Mummy, and they're like reading in you know, ancient Egyptian, and we're like, oh shit, like that sounds dope or whatever. And then it kind of like struck me, and I'm like, all right, so like, is doing magic in an ancient language intrinsically more magical? I guess is really the like surface level conversation.
So I think that it is only intrinsically more magical if you, as the spellcaster, feel intrinsically more magical by using that language.
Sure. Yeah, totally. I think that I basically agree. I think that doing magic in a different language, regardless of what that language is, whether it's you're just doing magic in Spanish, because you got to practice Spanish, because you got Spanish tests coming up, or you're doing magic in Latin because the ancient Greeks did it in Latin, or like, you're doing it in ancient Egyptian because like the ancient Egyptians did it in that language or whatever. I think that is the same thing as, do you light candles before you do magic?
Yeah.
Or do you cleanse your space, right? To me, it's no different than like washing your hands and feet, right? It's that like in ancient practices, you would like wash your hands and feet or wash the hands and feet of others before you like enter the temple or whatever, right? And so like, to me, it's like, if that is part of the like propriety in quotes of what you're doing, then like that is adding bonus magic, right? If we sort of like sphericalize that cow in a vacuum and think of magic as just like a like gamify it, right? And it's like, I can do like, I've got like 10 mana of magic that I can do. But if I light this candle, that candle adds +1 to magic, right? Like D&D style or like video game style. If I'm doing my magic in Latin, it adds +3 for linguistics to magic. Then like you're able to do more magic, right? And at that point, like, yeah, it totally serves a purpose. But like if it's not really doing anything for you, and especially if it is inhibiting your regular practice, because like I could be doing magic, but like I don't really know how to say fucking Brenda's out in Latin, then I can't do this cord cutting spell about Brenda or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? At that point in time, then doing that magic in that language, like using that language for magic, is now inhibiting, right? It's now a barrier, right? And I've never been one to even consider doing magic in another language.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I have no problem with doing it in English.
I've definitely considered it. But then when I've thought about the amount of like time and research and also writing the spell that I would have to do, I've always decided no, because I don't write spells when I do my own magic. I just sort of wing it.
Oh my God, yes.
And if I say something out loud then that's just like off the cuff. That's not planned and premeditated.
Yeah.
That's just,
we don't write this stuff out when we do our sabbats. We don't write nothing out. I mean, we like used to write stuff out, but it was always like say
we're like
say
doing
the written
a
out
thing,
part.
And then we're like, hold on. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and that's
but we were also still going off the cuff even when we were doing it written out stuff.
We're just ad-libbers.
Right? So we're just really ad-libbers. It's the same thing with the podcast. Like, we don't really have like a script. Or like when we do a movie review, we don't have fucking notes, dog.
No, rarely. Sometimes we do.
Yeah. Well, and if it is, it's just because it's like a thing that we're like, we got to remember this to bring up.
But also like we don't edit any of these videos.
Oh my goodness, no. These videos are entirely unedited and raw. But part of that, I'm gonna be real with you. 50% of that is because I'm lazy and I don't want to do that, and I'm not good at editing, and I'm more than willing to admit that I'm not good at editing and I don't want to do that, and it's like a lot of work, and I could spend several hours editing this video, or I could play video games or cook food or do more gardening or work on
also we are not in a place to have an editor hired
or work on shop stuff for the other business. So like I got other shit to do, right? Watch YouTube videos, whatever. But at the same time, right? Like, to me, I feel like this sort of the manner in which we produce these videos, where it's sort of raw and unedited, and we just have a topic that we're going off of, and the rest of it is off the cuff, minus occasionally having to cut out like a dog knocking something over and making a large noise, or like something to that extent, or the battery dies on the camera, or some such like that. With that minimal editing, you get more of like a true feel for what we're doing. And to that exact same end, right? That's the way that I sort of approach any sort of magical practice, is like, I could put together a big to-do, right? But I could also just not, right? I'm very much like ride the collapsing waveform of chaos, right? It's part of that like whole chaos magic thing that I'm increasingly aware of the manner in which I interact with reality. And it has allowed me to not only be more comfortable with like chaotic stuff and situations, but in my opinion, I have only ever seen positive results with regard to me not having more structure, right? And it's just the same as when like a while ago. But when we were just like, all right, we're going to do sabbats, and we were just like, we were super busy that week, and the food project, like the food that I was going to cook for everybody for the sabbat, was a bit more, a bigger bite than I expected. So it was like a lot more work. And by the time like people are over and I'm at the barbecue and Julie is like, oh, when are we going to do the ritual or whatever? And I'm like, oh, we'll do it at sundown like we always do, whatever. Right. And I was just like, oh, do I need to print the stuff? And she was like, I didn't write anything. And I was like, that's fair. I don't even know why I asked you. I didn't write anything either. we're just gonna wing it. And so we just, like, this was like the first time that we did this. Like, we had like no script. Normally we have like a little bit of like opening and closings, little bit of the, you know, calling it artistic or good in any way, I feel is like asymmetric to truth for me. But like the thing that I wrote that like brings circle protection for Thor's hammer or for the Gjallarhorn or whatever. Like, I enjoyed writing those and I'm proud of that writing piece, but like, I don't know, whatever, dude. It's not the same. It doesn't need to be the same every time. I'd rather just kind of go off the cuff. So we sort of like off the cuff an entire ritual for like friends and family who were over. And like that night, we had a ton of people come up to us afterwards, and they were like, it was so good. Oh my God.
They were like, best one ever.
Best one ever. All this kind of stuff. And we were like, oh shit, like this is really the way to be doing this.
Yeah.
And so we started doing that more and more. And so for me, it's the same thing with like, I could learn a language. I could learn Latin, do magic in Latin or whatever. But like, to what end? I feel like I'm just building a barrier and I'm not opening up a new vista of the potential to do magic when like there's already so many barriers to doing magic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And to doing that stuff. Most of those barriers are just that we don't have the time. Right. You know, we're all busy as heck. Right. It's whatever.
Well, it's not just time. It's also like a mental debt because you have to like do the work to make the translation.
And
now,
translate.
I would be curious to know if any of our listeners who are bilingual do magic in a different language.
Yeah. Do you do magic in your like if you're bilingual and English is your second language, do you do your magic in your first home language or do you do it in your English language?
Or not even necessarily in English. Like, do you do
if English is your first
mother
language
tongue or in a secondary tongue?
Yeah.
Or tertiary tongue?
Tertiary tongue. Yeah, totally. So like that would be interesting. And I mean, like maybe I'm just like absolutely like off the bong here and just talking out the side of my ass. And like, and like everybody's like, no, you got to do it in Latin. It's the only way to do it. And I'm just like an idiot, right? I'm totally willing to learn that. I'm going to disagree with you, but like I'm totally willing to learn that, right? But like, I don't know. Like, what do you guys think about something like that? The more that we thought about it and the more that we talked about it, the more I feel like in increasingly stark relief, we realized that like it may sound magical to us, but it's just some language to other people.
Yeah.
Right? And so like it doesn't intrinsically add to the magicalness in quotes.
Yeah.
Right? And like if it does for you, that's awesome and continue doing that, right? We're certainly not trying to talk people out of doing a thing. But I guess really the point of this is sort of that, like, how have you ever thought about it that way before? Firstly, have you ever thought about the fact that, like, when you're reading from the Book of the Dead, it's just English to them, for a lack of better words, right? It's just the language that they speak, and it only sounds magical to us because it would be our secondary or tertiary language, right? And then also, under that new regime of thinking, does it make sense for us to be doing magic in those other languages? Or do you do magic in a separate language than the language that you primarily speak? And if so, why or why not? Right? Like, I've always done magical stuff in English, although 50% of the time I don't even say stuff when I'm doing magic, right? It's all just like motion and shit. But like, you know, kind of like, how do you approach that?
Yeah.
Right? And then also, how do you sort of like, do you think that, because then like especially if you started to think about like, okay, so does that mean like if you're doing Greek, like if you're worshiping Persephone, you have to be speaking like Greek or Latin or whatever. And if you're worshiping Thor, you have to be speaking, I don't know, whatever, Norwegian or
ancient
Icelandic
Norse.
or ancient
Like
Norse
ancient
or
Norse.
whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're worshiping Isis, do you have to speak ancient Egyptian, Coptic,
But also,
or
like,
whatever?
we know that there's
there's a lot of gatekeeping in this
people
system.
from like other cultures worship deities outside of their own. Like, we talked about this in the Isis episode, where Isis, who was an Egyptian goddess, became widely worshipped in Greece and Rome. It is unlikely that they worshipped her and did their rituals in only Egyptian.
Sure, totally. So it's it's that thing where it's like, I mean, I guess the example to me is like if you're like Christian, right, and you're going to church or you're reading the Christian Bible, you're not reading the Bible in whatever the original language of the Bible is.
There's actually several.
I mean, there's several,
written in like Hebrew, and some parts are from Greek, and some parts are Roman, and some parts I think are even in Coptic, but also like there's
like several other languages involved. Yeah,
it's been so, like translated a whole bunch of different times.
Yeah, well, and it's like if you went to church, for a lack of better words, you went to Christian church in China, you're not going to English ass church.
Yeah,
dog, right? And also, they might not be using the King James version of the Bible. They might be using a different version of the Bible. There's like a buttload of different versions and stuff like that. So it really brought up this idea of like, in what manner do you practice? And then why do you choose that? Not as like a judgment or a gatekeep, because if you know anything about us, we are anti-gatekeeping about this shit. But why do you think that way? And then like, what do you think other, like, I don't necessarily like, what do you think other people should be doing? But like, what do you think that means, right? With regard to like, oh, if I'm gonna worship Zeus, I gotta learn Greek to be able to worship him. Like, is that beneficial? Is that non-beneficial? Is it more of just like a hobby, personal conversation, or like whatever? Because you see so many people being like building these barriers, building these rules into like, well, if you're gonna listen to this podcast and you're gonna follow us, then you've got to learn Klingon, because all Horde and Cauldron podcast magic is done in Klingon. Like, if we're just gonna like make some randomly selected rule, what makes it better or worse than anything else?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So I understand this is like a very, very wishy-washy, roundy sort of a conversation that we've been having, but like we ended up having several conversations about this, and we've talked on and off again about this since St. Patty's Day. And like, it just kind of came up as one of these things that like started as a like, oh, how funny is it that this guy's like having to read this Book of the Dead to like do this thing to save his sister or whatever. But like, he's struggling over this magical dead language, right? But like that, like, that's Amenhotep. That's just his language. That dude don't gotta read shit, dog.
Yeah.
Like, that's just you reading Harry Potter.
Yeah.
In English, you know? So it's like, for him, it's nothing magical, but for this guy, it's like this big deal. And then it's sort of connected to us trying to, like, having been talking about learning a language and, like, that kind of stuff, because part of that learning language was, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to learn Klingon. And also, I feel like magic would sound quite gangster in Klingon. You know? So, you know, or is the answer to all of these questions whatever the Spanglish version of a thing is, right? Where you're just sort of like dropping in whatever linguistic terms you need and just sort of like forming your own sort of a thing, you know, sort of like language of intent over ritual of specificity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting topic. And I think that it resulted in a fun series of conversations for us. And we kind of wanted to share those with you guys and see what y'all are thinking about, to like, you know, be like, oh, well, like, I've been thinking about learning Latin specifically for this magic. Okay, cool. Like, what do you think now that we've had this conversation?
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, whatever. This was just like sort of like an off the top of the head sort of conversation that we wanted to have with y'all, and we'll kind of leave it here for a lack of better
I'd love
words.
to hear what you guys think.
What do you think?
What are your
comment
takes?
below, or to the side, or above, or to the other side. It doesn't matter where you comment. Backwards or forwards in time. And either way, I have been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast pub chat edition, because of the drinking and the fact that everything that we just talked about made no bloody sense probably whatsoever. We will catch you guys next time for more mystical, magical mayhem. And have a pint and stay safe and stay magical out there, guys.
Yeah, and don't forget, breathe in self-confidence and breathe out self-doubt.